By now, the illusion is gone. This was never only about Gaza. Gaza was where the world looked. Gaza was where the suffering became impossible to ignore. But beneath that devastation was a deeper struggle that had been building for years. Out of sight for most people, shaping the region long before many viewers knew where to look. That deeper struggle is between Iran and Israel. To understand why this conflict feels so dangerous, you have to understand what those two countries represent to each other. Israel sees Iran as the power behind the forces gathering at its borders. The missiles, the militias, the money, the training, the pressure. To Israel, Iran is not a distant rival. It is the hand behind the ring of fire, building the kind of threat that, if left alone long enough, could one day become impossible to stop. Iran sees Israel as something more than an enemy state. It sees Israel as a heavily armed outpost of American power in a region Iran believes should never be shaped by Israeli dominance. To Iran's rulers, Israel is both a military threat and a symbol, a target around which they have built years of ideology, identity, and regional ambition. That is what makes this conflict different from an ordinary border dispute. Each side believes the other is shaping a future in which it may not be safe, free, or able to survive on its own terms. That kind of fear changes how nations behave. It teaches them to strike early, to hide less, to trust less, to treat hesitation as danger. For years, that is how this conflict operated. Iran built a reach. Israel tried to break it. Iran's armed allies built influence, moved weapons, strengthened militias, and spread pressure across the region. Israel hit weapons transfers, targeted commanders, bombed positions, and tried to break that network before it could tighten. This was the Shadow War, a war of covert strikes, sabotage, denials, cyber attacks, assassinations, warnings, and funerals. A war everybody could see but nobody wanted to fully name. It stayed alive because both sides believed they could manage it without letting it become something larger. But that kind of war has limits. Eventually, the shadows stop being enough. Too many dead, too much humiliation, too much pressure from allies, rivals, and the public. Too many reasons to prove strength. Too many chances for leaders to mistake escalation for control. That is when the hidden war moves into the open. And once it does, the cost changes. Now it is not only commanders and covert units living inside the danger. It is in apartment buildings, city blocks, fuel depots, power stations, hospitals, families listening for sirens, parents deciding whether to stay, flee, hide, or hope. A child in Israel running to a shelter. A child in Iran waking to the shock of another strike. Families in Lebanon wondering if this will become their war all over again. Palestinians in Gaza already living inside a catastrophe, now watching the whole region tilt further into it. This is the ugliest part of modern war. The people making the largest decisions are rarely the ones crouching in stairwells, sleeping in hospitals, searching through rubble, or waiting for a phone call that does not come. And yet those people are the ones who end up carrying the consequences of every doctrine, every speech, every red line, every retaliation. This is where America moves from the edge of the frame to the center of it. The United States is tied to this conflict by alliance, by military presence, by strategy, by politics, and by the simple fact that when the region shakes hard enough, America feels it. Publicly, the reasons are familiar. Defend an ally, protect American troops, keep shipping lanes open, prevent a wider regional collapse. All of that is real. But there is more underneath it. The United States has spent decades building bases, partnerships, military networks, and political influence across the Middle East. It does not want Iran, or the forces aligned with Iran, to become strong enough to threaten that system. It does not want allies doubting American protection. It does not want enemies deciding the United States. Warnings mean less than they used to. That is part of why America stays close, even when many Americans are tired of wars in this region. Then there is another layer people often sense, even if they do not always name it clearly. War runs on more than anger. It runs on money, industry contracts, oil routes, sanctions, arms flows, political pressure, and the careers of people who rise when fear rises. Every conflict leaves some people richer, more powerful, or more relevant than they were before it began. That does not mean every war is secretly scripted for profit. It means war, once it grows large enough, starts feeding systems that do not hurry toward peace. Religion matters too, but not in the lazy way people often describe it. This is not just ancient hatred floating unchanged through history. Religion here gives people identity, purpose, memory, legitimacy, and a language to explain suffering. It tells communities who they are, what is sacred, and why compromise can feel like betrayal. But faith is only part of the engine. States still want security. Militias still want leverage. Governments still want deterrence. Powers still want dominance. So what drives this war is not only belief. It is a belief tied to strategy, meaning fused to force. That is why it is so hard to stop. Now step back and look at the whole picture. Israel believes it must break the threat forming around it before that threat becomes unmanageable. Iran believes it must keep building power and pressure or risk being isolated, weakened, and eventually broken by stronger enemies. America believes that if it does not hold the line here, the cost may spread far beyond this battlefield. And ordinary people, as always, are left beneath the language of necessity. They are the ones who lose electricity first, the ones who run when the sirens start, the ones who search hospitals for names, the ones who bury children, parents, friends, and neighbors while leaders explain why there was no other choice. That is what is really at stake. Not just influence, not just territory, not just deterrence, but whether millions of people across this region are forced to live for another generation inside fear, displacement, ruin, and inherited grief. And if this keeps climbing, the danger is not just more headlines. More families are pulled from homes. More cities are living under threat. More disruption to food, fuel, water, medicine, and movement. More chances for one strike to trigger 5 more. More chances for an already wounded region to become unrecognizable. This is how larger disasters are built. Not all at once. Step by step, strike by strike, speech by speech, funeral by funeral, until the people inside it no longer remember what normal life felt like before the war moved into everything. So what is this really about? On the surface, it is about security, retaliation, rockets, alliances, self-defense, and survival. Underneath, it is about who gets to shape the Middle East through fear, force, and endurance. Who gets to arm allies? Who gets to intimidate enemies? Who gets to define order? Who gets to live with power and who is forced to live under threat? And wrapped around all of that is the oldest lie war tells, that one more strike will finally make everyone safe. Sometimes it buys time. Often it builds the next disaster. That is the truth. This whole story keeps circling. Every side says it is trying to stop a catastrophe. Every side says it is acting because it must. Every side points to its dead, its fear, its history, and its right to survive. And many on every side truly believe that. But belief does not make fire less deadly. It only makes it easier to carry. So when people ask what this war is about, the answer is not one event, one border, or one enemy. It is a chain. Gaza opened the wound. The region answered. Iran and Israel stepped out of the shadows. America moved closer because it was always closer than it liked to admit. Power gave the conflict structure. Faith gave it meaning. Fear kept it growing. And now the region stands in that darkest place a conflict can reach. The place where nearly everyone says they are trying to prevent disaster, while together they are building it.